Hey, what's going on, Panda fam? I got a special video here for you today. Today we're going to be talking about the It 2 movie, spoiler free, spoiler free. And we're going to do it in a couple of different ways. We're going to do it in a way that first discusses how the movie is kind of by itself, and then how the movie fits into the Dark Tower universe. So the first half of this review is going to be spoiler free, and then about halfway through, and I'll give you guys a warning that spoilers will be coming as soon as we make our way into the Dark Tower discussion with it too. So, without further ado, the other thing that I do want to talk about, because this is substantial, and there's you guys can see the article that I have posted up here. It seems like there's been a resurgence or a renaissance of Stephen King movies, if you will. And we're going to go through this article today a little bit. So I found it this weekend, and I thought it was a very good read regarding Stephen King and Hollywood's kind of roller coaster infatuation with him and his books and making them into movies. And then after we're done talking about that, I'm going to go briefly into the brand new Dr. Sleep trailer, because holy crap, man. Does that look good? So anyway, without further ado, let's get right on into it and talk about the second It movie. And I'm just gonna say for people right away, right off a rip, about first 10 minutes of the movie, you get a very good visual representation of the psychological tuggings that are gonna happen to you in this movie, with a very, very brutal scene. And I won't go too much into it. Suffice to say that it's kind of it's a violent scene. It's a hate crime scene, and it's the intention is to make you feel uncomfortable. It's to make you squirm in your seat, and there's a reason for that. They put that in the movie so very early on. It's to let you know. It's to signal to the viewer, hey, this movie is about to mess with you, mess with your mind, mess with you psychologically. And that, first of all, well, second, let me just say that this movie is a very accurate representation of the books, or the book. It stayed much more true to the book ending. For anybody who has read the book and has seen the trailers, so this is really not a spoiler. They do stay true to it and discuss the ritual of Chud, and that is kind of the main tool for defeating this monster Pennywise. I'm gonna get the bad out of the way with this movie right away and say that there is one particular character that every scene revolving around this particular character is I won't call it a throwaway scene because there's meaning to it, but it almost seems kind of corny and out of place. And I think if you go see this movie, you'll understand which character I'm referring to. So yeah. So anyway, so we're moving along past the first pretty gruesome psychological scene, and that scene ends off, if you all have seen the trailers, that scene that I'm referring to, the one that's very, very violent and psychologically squeamish almost, or uncomfortable, is the scene in the trailer where you see Pennywise, and there's a kid in the river, and he's like, help, help, and Pennywise comes over and like scoops him up. That's the scene that I'm referencing. That's the end of the scene that I'm referencing. And then we transition. We start talking about Derry, 27 years later after the first It movie, and how people who go away from Derry tend to forget the things that happened to them in Derry. Very, very psychological, this town. And one of the main characters that ended up staying in Derry didn't forget everything that happened. And he's been looking through books and doing everything he can to kind of educate himself in the history of Pennywise. And as soon as he finds out that the kids in the first scene, well, essentially get taken by Pennywise, he realizes that that the clown is back, and that he needs to call the Losers Club and kind of reassemble the gang from that oath that they took when they were kids. So he starts calling. It's Mike, by the way, who's the kid that stays behind, and he starts calling all of the losers. And it's funny, as he's calling them all, they're all like, who is this guy? Like, what? And it just further reiterates, Bill is a movie writer now, and he has lost his stutter completely. Some of the other characters, they all seem to lead very successful lives, which is very interesting considering, as soon as you get away from Derry kind of leaves you behind. And that's kind of the supernatural thing that we'll talk about in regard to the Dark Tower. So they're going through, and they all reconvene. And one of the great things about this movie that I do have to give them a lot of compliments to is a lot of the movie is kind of a juxtaposition of them coming back to Derry as adults and slowly regaining the memories that they had when they were children. Because again, when you leave Derry, something weird happens, and you just kind of, like, it's almost like a haze. The further away and the longer you are gone from Derry, the less and less you remember about it. But as soon as you come back, all of those old things start flooding back. I think the biggest indicator that they had to show this was Bill's stutter. As soon as he came back to Derry, that stutter came back. And it just goes to show you, and we'll talk about this as we stray into the spoiler territory and we talk about Dark Tower connections, that there's something strange about Derry, whether it's Pennywise or something more there. So we'll find out. Hopefully. But the scenes with them as kids, they did a really excellent job of using those scenes to really emotionally tie you back to the first movie. Because a lot of times I found myself through this movie asking myself, why am I emotionally invested in these characters? And as soon as I found myself asking that question, they had a flashback scene where they were kids, or they were remembering something. One of the big themes of the movie is, not necessarily being dictated by your past, but remembering your past and holding on to trinkets and memories and things that are indicators of past things that have happened or what have you. So that's a lot of what this movie is doing. They come back to Derry, and they are essentially trying to remember what happened to them as kids. So we go through the movie, and we kind of get each loser's memory, and we almost get like kind of a different memory, or a memory before a scene that we saw in the first movie, or a memory like right after a scene that we saw in the first movie, which I think also does a great job of further filling in the first movie and making the first movie even better than it originally was. Like I go back and watch the first movie now and know that some of those flashback scenes are either directly before or after a scene that's in that movie. It's almost like what they did with with Endgame, where they went back to all the past scenes, and they almost painted an outside the border picture for you to see what was happening. Like for example, when they went back to the Avengers movie, and you could see all the stuff that was happening like around the battle that was cool, because then you could go back to that movie and be like, well, this was happening, and that was happening, and this was happening, but you don't see it on screen. It's really kind of a nifty way to kind of pull people back to that first movie too, in my opinion anyway. So we're moving along through the movie, and obviously we have our final confrontation with Pennywise the Clown, and I will not spoil anything here right now. Suffice to say that they keep it very true to the book, and it seems like, I believe each loser gets their battle of wills. I'll just say that. I won't say what it is, I won't say how it happens, but each loser gets their battle of wills, whether that be individually or with other losers that are significant to that like they don't all go into their battle of will individually, let's just put it that way. Some of them go in groups of twos, but you know it when it happens, when you see it. They don't say it. It's not like a scene where like Pennywise has them all in like they go into some trippy alternate dimension where they're like all in a group fighting him like in their minds. That's not what happens. But the way that they do it is pretty nifty, in my opinion. And very well done. Very well done, and it keeps the flow of the movie going. As far as the conclusion to the movie, the end of the movie, very good. Kind of ties everything up in a nice bow. So yeah, I would say, as far as this movie is concerned, I would definitely give it a 4.25 out of 5. I would put it on par with the first movie, if only because the first movie was an excellent coming-of-age story, regardless of Pennywise. So that movie in and of itself stood separately. I would give the first movie a 4.5 or 4.4 out of 5. The second movie I'd give a 4.25, if only because we're not telling a coming-of-age story, and instead of the children being used as a theme in the story, they're being used as a plot device. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. The flashback scenes are very, very integral and very good about, if you don't remember much of the first movie, they're good about filling in those blank spots for you, and B, they're good about painting a bigger picture in the first movie about what happens. So 4.25 out of 5. I would definitely recommend seeing it. It stands alone very well as an individual movie because of those flashback scenes. They remind you of what happened in the first movie. It does very well separately as a two-parter, separate from the Stephen King timeline, the Dark Tower timeline, and all of that stuff. Very good movie. Great usage of the flashbacks. The only thing I would take out of it, or maybe limit even more so, are a scene with one particular character where it just seems corny as shit. Even the horror aspect of it, or what's supposed to be scary about the scenes, I almost like laughed at it. I don't know if it was supposed to be comic relief, or if it was actually supposed to make you jump, but like that was the only thing in the movie that I was like, yeah, we could do without this. And again, if you guys go and see it, I think you'll understand what character I'm referencing when I talk about this. That aside, let's move into spoiler territory. For those of you who do not want to hear spoilers about this movie, you do not want to hear spoilers about The Dark Tower or other movies, please click forward now, skip ahead. Warning, Will Robinson, danger. Spoilers. Okay, I think we've got the spoiler warning out of the way. I'm going to focus on this article in the next part of this discussion regarding this book because I think it was an excellent article. It's basically, the article goes on to explain why right now could possibly be one of the best times to be a Stephen King fan ever. So, Chapter 2, Dark Tower thread. I'm gonna cast some threads out there, guys, and I want you to do your best to try and follow along with me. I want you to do your best to try and follow along with me. We're gonna go down the rabbit hole, folks, a little bit. So, Chapter 2. First, let's talk about Dark Tower Easter eggs. When they're doing the Ritual of Chud, or when Mike is talking to Bill about the Ritual of Chud, first of all, can we just talk about the scene where Mike goes and talks to the ancient tribe? Manny much? Was Mike going toe dash in that scene? Sure seemed like it. Sure seemed like he was vibrating between universes when he was having his little trip out experience about how to beat the creature, Pennywise. And those tribesmen sure looked like they were holding a bunch of trinkets and chanting. And for any of you guys who are fans of the Dark Tower, seeing this scene and seeing it actually on the silver screen excites me. It means they're not afraid to go into the supernatural when it comes to Stephen King. See, here's the thing with Stephen King that I think the audience, the movie audience, has been pigeonholed into. We've had blinders put on in front of our eyes, right? This is how we go into Stephen King movies. This has to be a horror movie, gory, psychological horror movie. It's got to be a slasher. There's got to be blood all over the place. It's got to make you jump all over the place. Wrong. That is not how you go into a Stephen King movie. And unfortunately, that's how we've been conditioned to do so. What people need to start realizing with these movies is that if someone decides to, and this is why I'm bringing up this article today, because I think someone's finally figuring it out. If someone wants to draw a thread between all these movies, they can. They just need to be not so afraid to talk about the supernatural. There's a world to be built here, a rich one, called the Dark Tower universe. And I think this guy, Roy Lee, might just be the guy to make that happen. We can only hope. So we've got Easter eggs abound, right? We've got Mike going toe dash and essentially conversing with the Manny about how to beat this thing, and that they've done it, tried to do it in the past. That's we're theorizing at this point, guys, because he calls it some other tribe or something, I think some Native American tribe or whatever that fought the beast and tried to, defeat it 500 years ago, and they couldn't do it, or a couple hundred years ago, and they couldn't do it because they did the ritual wrong and all that stuff. There's a universe to be created here. And the success of Pet Sematary and It and Castle Rock and all of these other Stephen King things. Now you've got Dr. Sleep coming out, which is a direct sequel to The Shining. If anybody knows The Shining, if anybody knows The Dark Tower, they know that The Shine is a big part of the Dark Tower books. Jake Chambers has it. Elaine has it. His old quartet member, one of his old quartet members. Ted Brodigan from Hearts in Atlantis has it. The girl Abra has it in Dr. Sleep. And Danny has it. Danny has it. You know who else I think has the shine? Especially after her encounter with Pennywise from the first It movie? Beverly. Furthermore, can we just theorize and posit that maybe the Losers Club is a quartet in and of themselves? Very likely, considering who we're talking about wrote these books. And my theory that Beverly is afflicted with the shine is because she sees essentially how every one of them is supposed to die if they don't beat Pennywise the second time around. If they don't kill him for good, they're all supposed to die. They're all supposed to, whether it be by some accident or that they kill themselves, they all supposed to die. It's not good. Not good situation. So in that regard, I believe Beverly has the shine. It's almost like a proximity thing because she was shown the deadlights in the first movie and actually came back from it. Kind of like the boy from Hearts in Atlantis when he was around Ted Brodigan. He had an extra sensory perception. The movie doesn't show it very well. The only time you get a sense of it is when he calls his mom out after her business trip with her boss. Ted calls her out and then the kid calls her out. And after Ted leaves, his ability diminishes. So much so that he can't see the stuff or feel these things anymore. And I think that's how Beverly is in the It movie. There's a turtle Easter egg. And for those of you who are aware, Machurin the turtle is the sworn nemesis of the being It and is one of the protectors of the beam. Probably the guardian of the beam that the Losers Club resides on and that this particular universe resides on. Now, let's talk about this article and a couple of particular comments. So this article is going into how this guy Roy Lee is a huge Stephen King fan. Like, if I could be Roy Lee, I would be Roy Lee. Let's just put it that way. Like, the kind of guy who is obsessed with Stephen King and has an in in the movie industry. Excuse me. I want to draw your attention to this paragraph right here. It took 12 years and multiple passes of the screenplay, but Lee's idea paid dividends. Scariest is subjective, but most profitable isn't up for debate. That breakthrough paved the path for Lee to take on more King-based projects. In addition to the It duology, and get excited, King fans, Salem's Lot, heavy Dark Tower overtones. The Tommyknockers, meh. The Eyes of the Dragon, the only movie that I can think of that wasn't that shitty Dark Tower movie, that directly takes place in Roland's world, in Inworld, and Midworld. The Eyes of the Dragon directly references Flag as a bad guy, who we all know is the Man in Black. How excited are you, Stephen King fans? We're drawing that thread. We're connecting those movies now, maybe. Eyes of the Dragon, Dr. Sleep, The Stand. All of these movies have heavy Dark Tower implications. I will end this particular video with this particular paragraph. Someone finally is saying it. Someone's finally saying that someone can do with Stephen King what Feige did with Marvel. Methinks a Dark Tower extended universe might be on the horizon, folks. Here's the quote I'll leave you with on this particular portion of the video. He is a very prolific writer of incredibly cinematic material, says Lee. And then coupled with the success of it, it's just the perfect storm for a renaissance, not unlike what went on with Stan Lee after the emergence of comic book movies. Sort of like comic book movies are a genre in and of themselves, it feels like Stephen King is a genre in and of itself. Because you can have stuff from heartfelt teen coming-of-age movies like Stand By Me to the gory slasher movies. It runs the gamut of different types of genres within the Stephen King universe. And with that, I bring you The Dark Tower, or I'm sorry, the Doctor Sleep trailer, part 2. So Danny's talking about the Overlook Hotel here. And this is the scene where he goes back. And for those of you who know about the Dark Tower and about... So here you can see him. Red Room. Here's Johnny. Here's Danny. And we're just... He's narrating at this point, and this is very good. This is him early on in the book when he's dealing with his alcoholism and he's a wanderer, and they do a very good job of making him look at that. He looks so disheveled. He looks like a guy who's been drinking demons away. And then the communications from this girl. Now the only difference that they do between the book that I can see so far is instead of the girl being like 3 or 4 or 5 years old, like essentially a baby with these powers, she's more like a 9 or 10-year-old girl, it looks like at this point. Yeah, maybe 8 to 10 years, but they've obviously aged her up just a little bit because in the book she's not really, I mean, she's very powerful. Let's not make any mistake. She is quite possibly the most powerful Shine user in all of Stephen King's universe. Like, even more powerful than Ted Brodigan, man. And that guy's a breaker. That guy helps other psychics get stronger and, like, psychically breaks the beams that hold the tower up. But this girl is stronger than he is. So that's one of the big differences from the book to the movie, is that they're aging her up a little bit, but this is her and him talking about how it's magic. He's magic, and he always used to see these things and bump against these things and creatures. Let's just call them what they are. They're Toadash creatures. He's a Shine user. Jake Chambers sees Toadash creatures. Elaine sees Toadash creatures. Shimi sees Toadash creatures. Roland can go Toadash. Roland isn't particularly gifted with the Shining. He's just incredibly, like, Roland borders on having almost such a heightened sense of things that are happening right there in the moment that he has the Shine because, I don't know, it's very hard to explain. Very hard to explain. And then you can see here Rose the Hat grabbing a Shine user after the movies, taking her to a park, and essentially, excuse me, Panda Fam, essentially stealing her essence. And this is wonderful. King fans rejoice. They are embracing the supernatural. They are showing it to you. These are vampires. These are vampires that reside on a separate level of the tower, that have interacted with our world before, with our level of the tower, with other levels of the tower. The vampire in Salem's Lot is one of the only master vampires that we ever come across in Stephen King's books. And those guys, those beings are ridiculous strong, man. Ridiculous. These are energy vampires, which also are referenced in the Dark Tower. They're not quite as strong as actual vampires, but they feed on Shine energy, which is exactly what the True Knot does, and Rose Rose the Hat, who leads the True Knot. They've been alive for many, many years. They use shine essence to essentially keep themselves immortal. So that's what she's doing here. She is essentially killing this girl and stealing her shine essence. They call it steam. Here's another girl that they're... And then Red Room. Red Room. Here, right here. This scene right here, folks, where she connects with Rose the Hat. Rose is like, I've never felt something this strong before. I've never felt one this powerful. Like, so she like goes to grab her on the back of the head, and you'll see in the next scene, she's like, ah, get out of my head. And she just blasts her away, dude. Oh my God, so strong, so strong. And you can bet at that point in the movie, they're thousands of miles away. So she's doing this from thousands of miles away, communicating with Danny, and essentially like force pushing this chick like 20 feet back and like blowing up a grocery store, like glass door. It's crazy. And then the Overlook. And anybody who's read the book knows that's where this ends. At the Overlook Hotel. There's that scene from the first movie where... See, she's strong, man. She's using powers there. Danny's reliving old things when he goes back to the Overlook Hotel. Oof. Oof. Stephen King fans. Stephen King fans rejoice. I think we're finally going down the rabbit hole. But what do you guys think? This is all just theory, but I think that there could be a Dark Tower extended universe coming. You've got all these movies, and then you've got the Dark Tower series coming out on Amazon. Theorize with me for a second. Just theorize with me for a second here. Let's think. Eyes of the Dragon. Eyes of the Dragon, for anybody who's read that book, ends with Flag getting stabbed through the eye and essentially running off. Hear me out now. They're remaking The Stand, right? Picture this, end credit scene. Eyes of the Dragon. Flag's running off. Teleports himself away, or whatever demonic crazy thing that the Man in Black does. Because we all know that Randall Flagg is the Man in Black. Let's not kid ourselves here. He's taken many forms in many worlds over many years. He is the #1 agent of the Crimson King. Flag runs off, end of the movie after he gets stabbed, end credits scene. Does his whatever, does what the Man in Black does and just teleports away, or uses one of the doors. Finds himself in some other body on Earth. And the Captain Trips virus has just hit. And that scene from the book where he talks about the world and evil and it's waiting for him to impregnate it with his evil. And that's how you end that end credit scene. Before you remake The Stand. Furthermore, end credit scene to The Stand. Randall Flagg has his face off with the good people from Colorado. And end credits scene there. He erects himself an Emerald Castle in the middle of a turnpike, thus setting the stage for Book 4, which is supposedly what the Amazon series is based off of. And that's where I'll leave it with you, Panda Fam. Think about that.